A revolution promises democracy. But what happens when a government facing a massive constitutional crisis decides its first major act is to seek the death penalty for its former leader?
Well, that is the pivotal question right now in Bangladesh. I mean, it is an incredibly high-stakes situation.
Right.
What started as a popular uprising, the July Revolution, did manage to topple a decade-long autocracy. But the aftermath it's just this explosive mix of fragile legitimacy and intense political fighting.
And that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We're looking at this whole volatile situation, the questionable legitimacy of this interim government, and the huge global controversy around the death sentence for former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina.
And, the looming threat of total institutional collapse. This isn't just some domestic drama.
No, not at all.
The court decision on November 17, 2025, it instantly triggered an international crisis. It's put the new government on a direct collision course with India, one of its most powerful neighbors.
Okay, so let's just set the scene for everyone. The news hook. On November 17th, the International Crimes Tribunal hands down a death sentence.
To former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her former Home Minister.
And the charge is crimes against humanity, right?
Yes.
Stemming from that violent crackdown during the 2024 uprising.
Exactly. We're talking about an estimated 1,400 civilian deaths. So this was meant to be a huge display of accountability.
But it immediately sparks a diplomatic firestorm.
Immediately. Hasina is in India, and Dhaka formally demands her extradition. They're calling India's refusal a highly unfriendly act.
And India's almost certainly going to refuse. Why?
Well, Indian analysts are already calling the case political vindictiveness. And, international standards are pretty clear here. You don't extradite someone if they're facing the death penalty or a trial that just didn't meet fair standards.
Right. So this whole international mess just shines a huge spotlight back on the domestic instability.
It really does. It highlights the impossible position of this unelected interim regime, which is struggling to hold power while at the same time facing its own accusations of authoritarian behavior. Just a dizzying situation.
Okay, let's dig into that core conflict then, the verdict itself. The tribunal found Hasina guilty of ordering the use of drones, helicopters, lethal weapons.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it sounds like definitive justice for those 1,400 deaths, and the chief prosecutor immediately hailed it as proof that no one is above the law.
But this is where the demand for accountability crashes right into concerns over due process. It's the difference between revenge and, actual justice.
That's the heart of the matter, and the concerns are really specific and serious. First, the trial was conducted in absentia.
She wasn't even there.
Neither she nor her former home minister. That alone raises questions.
And the sources also note they weren't represented by their own lawyers. That's a bedrock principle of international law.
That's right. They were assigned a single government-appointed lawyer for both of them.
A single lawyer for two different defendants.
Yes. Critics immediately pointed out the massive conflict of interest there. Their defenses could be completely different, but the lawyer never even got instructions from either of them.
And let's talk about the court itself. The International Crimes Tribunal, or ICT, this wasn't a standard criminal court.
No, it was originally set up to try crimes from the 1971 War of Independence. Using it for contemporary political crimes is seen by many as, weaponizing a very specialized court.
And why is it so useful for the government?
It's because of the Constitution itself. This is the crucial part. Articles 47(3) and 47A basically strip anyone accused of these specific crimes of fundamental rights.
So no right to a fair trial.
No right to a fair trial, no ability to appeal to the Supreme Court. It's a legal black hole.
So the irony here is that the new government, which came to power promising an end to autocracy, is now using these old authoritarian tools to prosecute the former leader.
Precisely. Human Rights Watch pointed out that they're accused of continuing the practice of bringing politically motivated cases. The old ruling party just calls it a kangaroo court. So this whole act risks looking less like justice and more like a political vendetta.
Which brings us to the foundation of the government itself. This is the big constitutional crisis.
This is the underlying structural flaw in this entire transition. The administration, led by Muhammad Yunus, is on incredibly thin legal ice.
Why? What's the problem?
You have to go back to 2011. The previous government, Hasina's government, abolished the caretaker government provision in the Constitution.
Okay, what was the caretaker government?
It was basically a neutral, non-political body that would step in to oversee elections after a prime minister resigned. It was a legal framework for a peaceful transition of power.
So without that provision, when Hasina resigned,
There was nothing. A total legal vacuum. The Constitution has no clear mechanism for an interim government like this one.
so their legitimacy rests purely on popular support, not the law.
Solely on popular expectations. And when you govern without a legal mandate, you start governing by decree, which, looks a lot like the autocratic behavior you just replaced.
And that popular support seems to be fading fast.
It is. They're getting resistance from the business and bureaucratic elites, and there's growing public anger. People see them delaying elections and misusing power.
There was that one specific example, the protest over the Public Service Amendment Ordinance. What was that about?
That ordinance was huge. It basically allowed for the summary dismissal of any government employee without a formal inquiry.
Just firing them on the spot?
Exactly. It's designed to purge the bureaucracy of old loyalists, but what it really does is destroy the professional civil service. It creates a system where everyone is just loyal to the current unelected bosses. It was called unlawful and repressive by the workers themselves.
This is terrifying. If the government's legitimacy is based on popular consent, and that consent is eroding, who else is challenging their authority?
The military. This is the big one. The Yunus administration wants elections in April 2026, saying they need to do reforms first.
And the military doesn't agree.
Not at all. The Army Chief, General Waker Uzzaman, publicly said he was dissatisfied with the delay. He wants polls by December.
That is a very bad sign in a country with a history of military intervention.
It's one of the clearest signals of institutional risk you can get. The Army is essentially putting a hard deadline on this political conflict.
Which brings us to the deadlock. The unity that drove the revolution is, completely gone.
It's shattered. Now it's just a zero-sum competition for power.
So you have two main camps, right?
Basically, yeah. On one side, you have the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP. They're the clear frontrunner, polling at over 41%.
So they want elections now.
Urgently. They are completely opposed to any major reforms before an election. Their argument is that an unelected government shouldn't get to tie the hands of the next elected one.
And on the other side are the groups that actually drove the revolution.
Exactly. The Islamist party Jamaat Islami, who are polling surprisingly well at over 31%, and the student-led National Citizens Party, they're the reformist bloc.
And they want to wait.
They're adamant. They want comprehensive reforms, constitutional changes, electoral reform before any vote. They say otherwise we just go back to the same old corrupt system.
But the chief advisor, Yunus, says any major reform needs political consensus.
And that consensus is just impossible right now. It can't happen. So the reform project stalls. And if they abandon reforms, the fear is that the old cycle of winner-take-all politics just starts all over again.
So let's circle back to the international standoff. India. Dhaka is calling their refusal to extradite a highly unfriendly act.
It's creating a lot of friction, but India is not going to return her. We mentioned the fair trial standards, but the critical factor is the death penalty.
So India gets to hold on to this major political asset.
It gives them huge leverage over this fragile new government. This is why Indian analysts are so open about seeing the case as political vindictiveness. They're using the standoff to influence the new government's direction.
And the UN has weighed in on the death penalty, too.
The UN Human Rights Office opposes it in all circumstances, and they told the interim government pretty clearly, if you want our help with fair trials and your democratic transition, you need a moratorium on capital punishment.
So they're caught. To get legitimacy, they need international help. But their first big judicial act is the very thing cutting them off from it.
It's a vicious cycle. The entire transition is stuck between this need for deep reform and the urgent pressure for a quick election. One set of authoritarian problems risks being immediately replaced by another.
The July Revolution was celebrated as the world's first successful Gen Z revolution. But with the rule of law compromised, the military making noise, and the political elites just fighting over the timeline, the foundation seems so weak.
They are incredibly weak. And the student activists who started this are in danger of just being subsumed by the old political parties who are already dominating the polls.
So the question for you to consider is this. Did this massive popular uprising truly secure the foundations of a resilient democracy? Or did it just trade a centralized autocracy for entrenched constitutional chaos?